Okay, we are live on LinkedIn. Hey, everybody, Kelly Burns here with Brett and Dave. How are you guys doing?
Doing great, Kelly. How are you today?
Good, good.
I'm doing fantastic.
On this rainy day we're having in the Kansas City area. And this
Exactly.
this is book discussion number 7 for us. Isn't that amazing? Yeah, the year is flying by. So, Brett, you want to do an update first?
Sure, sure.
Any kind of intro or update, whatever you want to share.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know where everybody that's on the listening audience is coming from, but we're coming to you from Kansas City. So it's springtime in Kansas City. And with that springtime comes warmer weather, at least so far. And, those outdoor projects and backyards and activities and all those things. And I'll confess, and I'm sure everybody's been through this, makes it a lot harder to find time to read. And boy, I have really struggled. So I'll be the first to confess. I read our book for this week in the last 5 days. So I thought a little bit about Dr. Cialdini and our psychology, the psychology of influence and social proof. And a month ago, I came out and made that commitment publicly that I'm going to read this book, and gosh darn it, I'm going to live up to that commitment. So in the last 5 days, I've done it. So what I found so interesting, and it's like anything, right? Once you get that sense of accomplishment, it's almost like an adrenaline rush of saying, hey, I met my goal. And granted, it was a small rush. It was a low bar. I agree. But just the fact that I did that, one, I got that sense of accomplishment. But then equally, this happened to be just an absolutely fantastic book. So not only did they get the that personal, satisfaction of completing the book, but man, I really benefited and I think grew and really walked away with some intriguing questions, I guess, that I really needed to ask myself as a leader. And then as we'll get into the content today, I play a role in the food supply, much like what takes place in the book. So that really kind of set me back on my heels, and I had to really reflect a little bit on that. So, but very, very excited to be here. And I think we've got some great content, and this is going to be a keeper today, guys.
Awesome. Yeah, right on. Dave?
Yeah. So, Brett, I think we're very similar in that as we have more hours of daylight in this time of year. I find myself outside a little bit more, spreading mulch and mowing the lawn and that sort of thing. So I too was not quite as prompt as getting the book read. As I was, getting closer to the deadline, I kind of thought of another book I read around time management. I'm struggling to remember the name of it, but one thing it talked about was, each person has 168 hours in every week. And we make the decision of how we spend that time, and the people that are successful don't have more time, they just make better use of it. So as we got closer and closer to the deadline, I too found the book to be pretty engaging. But competing priorities is definitely a way to put it. But yeah, as I got into it, I always view a good book as I always do a decent amount of reading before I go to bed, and I always know it's a good book if I wake up in the middle of the night with my iPad on top of me. I'm a digital reader, so often as I'm laying down for the evening, I'll read for a little bit. Sometimes it's 20 minutes, sometimes it's 2 hours, and it's always a good book if I know I'm getting tired, but I keep trying to push on. And then the next day, the quest always becomes exactly where did I fall asleep and figure out what that was. So. So happy to be here as well. In the education space, a lot of cool things going on as well. Finishing up the spring semester, which is as it starts to get warmer, and we have graduation. It's always kind of refreshing to see that next group of students go out into quote the workforce and start to make a difference. So I'm doing a lot of fun work right now with Rockhurst relationship with Kansas City University of Osteopathic Medicine, and launching a dental program and trying to figure out how to offer an MBA into a dental program. So been kind of fun trying to figure out how that fits together. It's been my big project for the last few months. So that's what's been going on in my world, and real happy to be here with everybody today.
Awesome. Okay, well, I'm gonna confess something to you both. This wasn't a struggle for me to read in the last couple weeks because this was the textbook in the class I just wrapped up. So in corporate social responsibility. So Brett, you'll like to see all the tabs marked, and but I had weeks and weeks to go through it, and recently, and I'd read it years ago, but was happy to go through it again. And hopefully there's some people that are joining us live that I invited the last class that just finished the semester to join, and then the new class coming up, hopefully they'll join in. And if anybody is watching live, please post us a comment, and we can't reply to the comments, but we can see them as they come in. We'd love to know if anybody's joining live. We know we get a few hundred to 1,000 or two that look at it in the next, afterwards when it's out there on LinkedIn. So whether you're live or not, we're happy to be with you today. So I want to just quickly share why we do these, and we choose the format carefully, and we don't want people to feel pressure to read the book like it's homework. Well, except the three of us, but for anyone else that joins. And we want to have a conversation about leadership books so that you can benefit from the book, whether you read it or not. But when we really like a book, we will emphasize that, as all three of us like this one, and encourage you to read it. And Brett, do you want to give the background of how we started these?
Sure. So I was actually a student in Kelly's class. Professional development, I believe, was the class, and we created a relationship and a bond. And I came out of that class, and Kelly came back and said, "Hey, would you be a guest speaker at one of my upcoming classes?" And I'm always, looking forward to opportunities to give back and look to develop the next set of leaders. So anyway, long story short, I went into her class, and one of the tenets that I've kind of prided myself on is this idea of reading. And I brought in literally, I think, the books that I'd read throughout my MBA, other than the textbooks, and it was armfuls. It was a big basket of books, and I set those out on the desk. And you started talking about my professional journey. Typically, when an alumni comes in, that's what the conversation is. Tell us about your journey. And a big component of that was these books. And before I knew it, the students in the class, really, they wanted to talk about the books, and they wanted to talk about mentorship. And there was a whole lot less talk about me and my journey, and a whole lot more talk about those things, to the point where people wanted my reading list. People wanted to buy the books that I had there that night.
Yeah.
It kind of just, took on a life of its own. And from that, it sparked this creative genius with Kelly. And now, as she pointed out earlier, we're in our 7th book review. So I've continued to add to my library and add to my reading list, and we've posted it, on the website. And, as we've developed and I've grown kind of in this particular space, come to find out there are many, many reading lists out there. Bill Gates puts out one. Warren Buffett's got one. I know Charlie Munger, who's the COO or co-CEO at Berkshire Hathaway, does one. But many accomplished people have reading lists. Bill Allen, who was part of the Microsoft group, I think when he died, Bill Gates spoke at his funeral, and one of the things that he spoke about was the fact that Bill Allen died surrounded by books. So, and I think I make the comment in the presentation I give for Kelly that, Elon Musk is famous for learning rocket science by reading books. So, the level of personal development, of education, whatever term you like to use, it's amazing what you can accomplish just by developing the good habit of reading. And the takeaway that I always end that presentation with, if you're challenged in how you write, it probably has something to do with how much you do or don't read. And if you read well, you write well. And I think those two things, reading and writing, will serve you well throughout your entire career.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right on. Dave, any thoughts to add to all of that with your leadership development?
Yeah, it's funny. I wish I could go back and find my English teacher from 9th grade. And he was a very active reader and was constantly, pushing that towards us as students. And being, 13 years old, I thought I knew it all, and was very, very vocal in the fact that why do we read these books? Had a very heavy reading list, for what I considered for a 9th grader. It really wasn't. And like that as well, I find after I finish each book, I'm revived and, kind of refreshed, going, what do I go read next? And, kind of to your point, Brett, I remember I read a book by General Tommy Franks. And that was one thing he talked about was, I'm paraphrasing, so nobody beat me up if I get the quote wrong, but he made mention to the fact that, we've made so many mistakes in history. Why would we not read and go back and learn from those mistakes and apply that forward? Mm-hmm. And, of course, Tommy Franks being a 4-star general, naturally got moved around a lot. And one thing that people complained about was his very large book collection went with him everywhere that he went. So I thought, this guy's traveling all the time to different command posts and being a major leader in the, United States military. I live in one place. What's my excuse?
Yeah, right on. Yeah, so we're all about the development of ourselves as leaders, and then sharing that with all of you. And that is why one of the reasons we picked this book. He talks in here, this is Conscious Capitalism. There you go, you can see it. Conscious Capitalism, Liberating the Heroic Spirit of Business. And he talks in here, which we'll talk a little bit more about, becoming a conscious leader, but he talks in here about a business cannot truly evolve, learn, and grow, which don't all of our companies need to be doing that right now, evolving, learning, and growing. It cannot do those if the leaders, particularly the CEO, are not learning and growing as well. So he talks about leadership can prevent the company from reaching its highest potential, or continue growing to help it continue, to help the company continue to grow too. So that's one of the reasons we chose this one. And also because of the application to any level of leader can incorporate the principles that are shared in this book. So it's written by John Mackey, who is one of the founders of Whole Foods, and by Raj Sisodia, who is, they together founded the Conscious Capitalism movement. There's a whole movement about it. I'm going to put the banner with our, there, you can go to this website, to voyagecg/leadership books, and there's a handout for you, and it has a couple links, including a link to the Conscious Capitalism organization. Brett, you want to chime in with a little bit more about your research into Whole Foods?
Sure. I was excited to kind of learn more about it. Obviously, we're reading about John Mackey's journey kind of in the contemporary space, but hey, what was the backstory on Whole Foods? So Whole Foods started as a company called Safer Way, kind of a knockoff, I think, on the the brand out west called Safeway, founded in Austin, Texas. Go figure, Austin being a liberal kind of hotbed, or Austin, Texas, by John Mackey and Renee Larson in 1978. Kind of goes through, if you do the research, as far as what the journey was, but their most famous acquisition, which they grew both organically and by acquisition, was the Wild Oats brand, which was kind of a competitor. Bought that company in 2007, and then Whole Foods was actually acquired in itself by Amazon in 2017 for $13.7 billion. So John Mackey makes the claim of how they started, literally, I think, with $45,000 in 1978, and then were devastated by a flood and literally almost lost everything, were it not for all the stakeholders that kind of came to their aid and brought the brand back. But the best I could find today, I think, is the store count is 497 stores, predominantly in the United States, with a few in the UK and in Canada. And then the last point was, the best that I can find, I don't believe John Mackey ever completed a college program. I think he started a couple of different times, but I don't think he ever actually got his official degree, which is kind of an interesting claim to be made for a gentleman who aspired to such a lofty position.
Yeah, and we talked in our pregame about that I saw a note that he went for 6 years to university, and in all of that time didn't compile a degree. But a lot of our authors are very highly educated and have multiple degrees. And Raj Sisodia is on not a break, I don't know what they call it, but he's a professor as well. I don't have the place right off the top of my head, but he is a professor, and as many of our authors have been professors or adjuncts, and so it's kind of funny to focus a lot. But one of the things in this book, John Mackey does share a lot of the mistakes that he made as the leader, or surprises, or some of the hard things that he went through as a leader. So I really appreciated that. Any comments, Dave, general comments about the book that you want to make before we dive into some questions?
Yeah, just, kind of high level, what got my attention, I think, in like the first handful of pages was the authors made the comment, people will patronize establishments that align with their value system. And, a lot of thoughts come to me on that I think we'll get into later. But as soon as I read that sentence, I went, okay, this is going to be a book that I think will really resonate well with me. So yeah, great read.
Good. Brett, anything general?
You kind of mentioned a little bit of it, about how we're coming together here for leadership, and then we frame this around books. I mean, that's really the basis of kind of why we're here. And, although most of what we talk about is early stage leaders, young college graduates, middle managers, there's a lot in this, I think, that can be talked about even at the most senior level. So the thing I think that jumped out here is some of the books that we've read, we can endorse. And, and this is one that I think we really, really can endorse. We're all getting behind that. And as I tried to boil it down to kind of a keynote statement, the book really asks, I think, what are two kind of really probing question. What's the purpose of business? And I think he covers that in a lot of different parts of the book. And then really the second, I think, thing that jumped out at me was this: what are the obligations of business to the stakeholders? And I think so often today people look to the government and say, okay, the government's going to fix this, or what can the government do? And I think John Mackey really points out that government by definition has some inherent limitations, and business is really that entity or that feature, I don't know what term you want to use, that really needs to step in and fill that void. So he really puts the onus back on business and kind of takes away almost the crutch, if you will, or takes away the excuses from corporate leaders to say, not why, but why not?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and in our history, a lot of the biggest problems have been solved by business more than government. So,
Absolutely.
And having this kind of a mindset of conscious capitalism is becoming more and more popular or common after the pandemic. That's one of the things that stood out to me, because the book came out before that. But thinking about people are looking for more of a personal purpose, creating companies with more of a purpose, and aligning all the employees toward a purpose, and looking at that bigger picture. And I think that's not slowing down anytime soon. So,
well, he doesn't specifically call out the shareholder stakeholder debate. I was waiting for that to come out as a topic, but he doesn't specifically go there. He talks about the invisible hand and Milton Friedman and, those kind of statements, which are kind of keystone or cornerstone statements in business school. We've all had those classes and had those topics. But, if you were to say stakeholder shareholders, he would, I think, really argue that the stakeholders are the shareholders are a stakeholder.
Yeah.
So rather than saying one versus the other and that there's a trade-off, hey, you know what, we're really all in this together, and we really don't have to take from one to give to the other, that we can all win and make the pie bigger.
And that's the big difference in management leadership now, or with this mindset versus, in the past, and outdated management versus more modern management thinking that you have to have a trade-off and he considers investors one of the stakeholders, but they're not more important than the employees or the customers or suppliers or the community. Those are the 5 stakeholders that he focuses on. And it used to be common. It used to be, even within the past few years, and some companies today, it was so common to have a trade-off of pay your people less, so the stockholders could get their money, leading on for a quarterly basis for what are the analysts saying on Wall Street.
Mm-hmm.
And
he makes several comments in here about, the executives all know what each other make, and right. The executives aren't entitled to any more status or privilege or benefit than the regular employees. It was, and it's a, I can't. He even mentions, several companies, the Container Store and Southwest Airlines are the two that he probably references the most. And Medtronic was one that came up several times as well. Yeah, it's kind of a novel idea, and he almost, I think, baits other CEOs to say, "Hey, we did it. Why can't you too?" Yep. And I go back to that not why but why not kind of thing. And and we're starting to see more and more companies, particularly in this time of this aggressive hiring, and you write about it a lot, Kelly, for Voyage, about the Great Resignation and poaching employees, about, it's time for employees to kind of get their share, because they've really left quite a bit at the table over the last several years.
Yeah. Dave?
Yeah, I think you nailed it. When we look at the Great Resignation, when we look at what's going on, I had one of those moments. I came out of college with a technical degree right as the .com era was busting. And, when I went into the program, we got told, we have 100% job placement, salaries are through the roof, you guys are going to be awesome, to a point where, less than 50% of us found jobs. Fast forward to today, I had a student come to me this spring term that I knew was graduating. And I said, "Are you interviewing?" And he said, "Like crazy." And I said, "Do you have any offers?" And he said, "Yes." And I said, "You don't mind asking how many?" And he said, 13.
Wow.
13 job offers. And he said, I'm just curious, Professor, are things like salary and vacation negotiable? And I said, if you have 13 offers, everything is negotiable. And I was just elated. I was so happy for this individual, because he came into our program and he got the same promise as I got as an undergrad, right? It's like a hot career field. There's jobs, there's money, there's opportunity. And he got all of that. with 13 job offers. So I said everything is negotiable at this point.
Yeah.
For once in all of my time in the workforce, the employee, the candidate, is in the driver's seat. And there's firms right now that are learning from this and truly embracing it. And there's firms that are continuing to struggle.
Mhm.
And what I find very interesting is, as I think all of us are, very active on LinkedIn, as I'm out there, I'm seeing more and more of my graduates post, proud to announce I just accepted a job with firm X. And they even have stock template that they're using, that
Yeah.
they the company logo and all of that. So I think some firms are starting to get incredibly creative in knowing, hey, we've really got to, change the way we do things to move the meter forward here. So I think it's a very welcome change, and I think it's very interesting. And I start every class the last couple of terms of telling students, I said, you have no idea how excited I am for you of the opportunity that's out there. You're going to have a lot of opportunity, and thus far that's been very true.
Yeah, that's exciting. 13, holy moly.
Yeah, that's the highest I've ever heard. I'm
That's
hearing
amazing.
very common 3 to 5.
Yeah.
This individual worked very hard, was very active during his degree. So yeah, he certainly earned it. So yeah,
And he was interviewing a lot too, spending a lot of time.
interviewing a ton.
Yeah. Yeah, that's exciting. I love seeing all of those announcements on LinkedIn too. And everything's negotiable because the employees aren't willing to sacrifice so that the leaders make money on their backs.
Right.
And then it's been interesting to see investors don't want that either. So a few years ago, Walmart started offering education reimbursement, and they increased the salaries of some of their management positions in the store management positions. And the only reason they did that, or I suspect the only reason they did that, was because the investors finally got sick of, or I'm sorry, the customers finally got sick of hearing the stories about the employees having to work 2 or 3 jobs just to make ends meet, basic ends meet. You can't work at Walmart full time in a store and pay your bills. And so that's when Walmart made the change, when this whole thing started happening. That was pre-COVID, and hopefully that's kept up for them. But companies need to get on board with this kind of thinking if they do want to keep the shareholders happy and the investors happy, because it's all interrelated now.
It truly is amazing. Right as restrictions started to lift and you were able to go back into a restaurant, my guilty pleasure is McDonald's breakfast. And I go into the store one morning, and I place my order, and they hand me the receipt with the number on it. We'll call you when it's ready thing. And I look over, and there's a 7-foot poster in the lobby area that says, come to work for us. And it tells, they offer a 401k, tuition assistance, paid time off, adoption assistance, all of these things. And I pull out my phone and I take a picture of it, and I'm dressed to go to work. So I've got, a sport coat on, and all of a sudden this McDonald's employee is standing there looking at me, and he said, are you interested? I could give you an application. And I said, well, I got to tell you, these are some amazing benefits.
Yeah.
I'm a professor. And I said, my first several jobs didn't have benefits this good. And he said, well, times are changing. And indeed they are.
Yeah. Yeah, it's good to see. Why do you think so? The times are changing partly because of COVID and the pandemic, but they were changing before that. And the book goes into a little bit about the business case for meaning. Any other thoughts about why corporations are changing and searching for more meaning and purpose?
Well, he talks a little bit about, and I think you mentioned it somewhat, as a leader, you've got to continue to be learning and continue to be evolving and continue to be developing. And he makes the case, I think at some point he was eating, I call it a traditional diet. I mean, probably a diet a lot like I eat, meat and potatoes and, a little bit of caffeine and probably not enough of everything else. And he says, he went to an annual meeting, I believe he said, and there was an activist outside, and he said, hey, we're already doing what we can for animal welfare. We're an organic store and selling healthy food. And I think the activist basically said, hey, no, you're not. You need to get smart about what you think you're doing. And he created a relationship with this activist and really engaged in a dialogue with this person. I don't remember her name exactly, but it sounded from from the reading, you got the sense that it was a relatively in-depth, mature, a deep relationship, rather than just, hey, I'm going to pacify this activist. And through that engagement, he found, he really didn't see that his company was really doing enough and really living out the values proposition that really they were kind of making their name upon. So he took it upon himself. And I think he makes a statement now that he's transitioned to an entirely vegan diet. So to your point, Kelly, you say, well, why now? I think, companies that are led by conscious leaders, really, which is what we're talking about, are saying, hey, we're not doing enough and we need to do more and we can do more and we should do more. And if you start to say, well, who are we going to do all these things for? Then he goes into breaking it down in what he calls the second tenet of the stakeholder integration, and saying, hey, each one of these stakeholders that's involved with he continually refers to the Whole Foods market as a market. And as a marketplace, and just to say, each one of the stakeholders that's involved with us as a market, we have an obligation to them, and we're going to satisfy the demands or the wants or the rights, however you want to frame it, to each one of those, rather than, as we talked about earlier, taking from one to give to the other.
Dave, any other thoughts on it?
Yeah, I think, Brett, you nailed it. I think the other driving force behind this has been, frankly, access to information, and technology has been a huge driver in that. Where we, as the consumer, we are empowered with, we never leave home without, this device in our hand, right? We don't go to the mailbox without it. We don't go to the bathroom without it. It never leaves our sight. And I think corporations have had to figure that out in many cases the hard way, that we as consumers have access to a treasure trove of information about you, the retailer, the company, the organization, the shareholders, the leadership team. And we've got instant access to that, good, bad, and indifferent. I reflect back, I had a family member that had to have a medical procedure done that involved a surgeon, and go to visit. This was pre-COVID, but go to the hospital to visit, post surgical procedure, and ask the family member, who is the surgeon that performed your surgery. And I pull up my phone and I look up the surgeon, and I'm reading about the surgeon. And just then the surgeon comes in to do the post-op exam. And I said, oh, well, you're Dr. So-and-so. You went to medical school here. You did your residency here. You did fellowship here. Your PQRI scores are this. Your overall patient satisfaction scores are Y. You've been on this board. You've done this and you've done that. And he looked at me and he said, how'd you get all that? And I said, right here on my cell phone. So we're so empowered. And again, it goes back to the comment I made at the very beginning around, we as consumers will patronize the establishments that align with our value systems. And technology makes it incredibly easy to do that today.
Yeah, and they that just made me think of, and we don't patronize the ones that are not aligned with our values. So when companies have had to spend a lot of effort on when they make a mistake. And just recently, Walmart had one with Juneteenth, and they created an ice cream and some other things they were marketing. I don't remember what it all was, but there were 2 or 3 things that they had put out there that were offensive to people that were involved with Juneteenth. And so they had to backtrack. And so far, it looked to me like they did a good job of backtracking and changing it. But a lot of companies messed all of that up. And, because, you're walking a fine line on that. And customers have a lot of information now, and you never know what they're going to think one day to the next. And you have to pay attention and have your finger on the pulse of what they're thinking, and be able to respond quickly to all of that. And we have all of this in our phones, and we're thinking of that as customers and as investors and as employees, right? And potential, and even suppliers.
Yeah, well, I think the other facet to this is, we have the information, but it's also exceptionally easy for us as a consumer to air those grievances, right? And I think of the last time I was trying to check into a hotel for a conference, and the check-in line was 1,000,000 miles long. And, there's one person working. So I pull out my phone and I make a comment on Twitter and call out the organization. And I said, I'm paying $189 a night to stay here. I've been waiting in line for 45 minutes to check in. I don't even have a room yet, and this is horrible customer service. And within 15 minutes, I got a tweet back that said, "We're so sorry. We've sent more people down to the front desk. We'll try and get you checked in a little bit quicker." So, I mean, it's instantaneous now.
Wow.
There's the organizations that get that. They adjust very quickly. Then there's the ones that don't, and they pay the price.
Yeah.
They do.
Yeah. So
I've got a couple bullets here that we're getting close on time, but I just think they're great. And, you know, as we went through the book, there was a section in here about the term, and I'd never heard this. I've experienced it, but this finally put a word on it. It's called the helper's high. And I read that and I kind of paused for a minute, reflected, and you know, I've been just abundantly blessed in my life with a beautiful family. I've got a great job, you know, tremendous financial resources, and I feel obligated to give back, you know, and I don't do it near as often as I could or should, but every opportunity I do, I try to step forward, whether it's at the church or whatever the case may be. And when you're done with that, you always feel better. And it's that, you know, the joy is in the giving, not the receiving. And I never heard the term helper's high. And in the book, you know, there it is. It's this, like I said, they actually have a title for it, but it's called helper's high. So I don't know if either one of you have ever experienced that in what you're doing or not, but I wanted to throw that out. I've got a couple others I thought that were really great.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah. What else you got?
You know,
I'm curious to see what you're listed.
Well, in our pregame, and I kept reading this and thinking, oh, this is easy for Whole Foods Market because it's a startup, you know, it's a small company. And then there was actually, and as I'm reading, I didn't anticipate this, and all of a sudden I come to a section in the book, and John Mackey, the author, actually says, and this doesn't just apply to startup companies. And I'm thinking to myself, is he reading my mind or something? and then he goes into detail about, you know, the Container Store, Southwest Airlines, Patagonia, the apparel store, Medtronic, which is an extremely large medical company, and I think they even talked about the volume of sales where they went from startup to where they're at now, and it's just an astronomical number. But the point is that, you know, to be a conscious capitalism type company or be a conscious leader or a conscious company, you know, it doesn't necessarily have to just be a startup that's nimble and flexible and, you know, is easily controlled. I mean, big companies, big Fortune 500 companies can live and follow this mantra as well, which I thought was pretty neat. And then there was a whole reference to trust. And as Kelly pointed out earlier, I'd forgotten that this was our 7th conversation. And I even made a note here in my script. I said, you know, I forgot how many this is, but it's been a lot. And I don't think we've had one conversation yet where that topic of trust hasn't come up. And until we kind of started this dialogue, you know, I always knew trust was important. I mean, it's kind of table stakes as a manager or leader. But boy, I tell you what, it is the bedrock of just about everything related to leadership. I mean, if you don't have the components and the presence of trust, you know, you probably don't have a very highly evolved functioning organization, would just be my thought. But Mackey spends just a considerable amount of time on that whole concept of trust, which I thought it reinforced everything we've read before. But, you know, again, trust. You just can't have enough of that.
I think we've talked about Stephen M. R. Covey's book, The Speed of Trust, and he has a brand new book out called Trust and Inspire. So I listened to him do a talk yesterday about that book. So we ought to take a look at that and add it to our list. It's back here on one of my shelves back here.
I don't have that one yet.
Yeah, Trust and Inspire. So taking that to another level. And his model in there is trust, inspire, and model what you want. So yeah, that's a good foundation for all of leadership. And, you know, that does tie into the integration of the stakeholders. So it's high trust for all of them and for them with each other. So that's making a difference. And there is a business case for it. And he spells it out in the book, in this Conscious Capitalism book.
Yeah, I like that, a business case for trust. And I've read The Speed to Trust, which I really got a lot of value on. So I'm excited to see where we go with that one. The last point I made here, Mackey goes into detail about, and I think it was right during the 2008 economic decline where Whole Foods was doing poorly and they laid off some employees. And he was really kind of at wit's end. He didn't really understand or have a plan. How are we going to turn this around? So, you know, he took it upon himself to visit every store, which I don't know how many stores they had at that time, probably less than 497. But throughout the course of that year, he literally went to every store and met with as many employees, again, a stakeholder as he could, and just said, hey, how can we do better for you as an employee? Because he recognized that happy employees equal happy customers and better customer service. And he took down everything that he heard, and kudos to him for not only listening, again, a great skill, but then went back to his office, corporate headquarters, whatever, and actually implemented many of the things that he'd heard. And whether it was good fortune, circumstances, whatever you want to think, the company was able to resurrect the phoenix from the ashes and turn it into the organic foods wholesaler behemoth that it is today. But again, being a good listener, something that we've heard time and time again, having a high level of trust, again, something else that we've heard time and time again.
Yeah, right on. Good stuff. Before we wrap up this one, I know we're just a little bit over our 30-minute mark, but really quickly, can you think of did you think of any examples of a conscious capitalism leader? Have you worked with any, or can you think of any that you know or know about, any in our area?
I've had so many mentors throughout my career, and each one's got certain components of this. And for the young people who've maybe never had a boss, or maybe only had one boss, you don't reflect on it as much. But when you get to my stage in your career and you've had multiple bosses and multiple leaders, you start to compare one against the other and figure out what you liked about this one or what you didn't like about that one. And, I almost do a, kind of tongue-in-cheek, lighthearted kind of thing. But, I'll confess, I've never had a leader who's quite fits the model or fits the mold of a John Mackey, but I'm sure that's probably the case for many. I mean, he's a unique gem within all leaders, I'm sure.
Yeah. Dave, did you think of anyone?
Yeah, what's interesting is I've got in my notes here talking about the qualities of a conscious leader, and one that did stick out. They mentioned some of those characteristics were great joy in the work, they live their calling, dedicated in their work, and work energizes them. And I think about a CEO of a company I worked for, and at one point he said, if you're excited about what you do, time doesn't matter. And he said, I didn't wear a watch for years because when you're innovating and when you're doing what you love, time just doesn't matter. And I thought, well, that's great, but the daycare does keep track of time, and if I don't pick the kid up by a certain amount of time, that's a problem. But yeah, I did get that opportunity when I worked with the Cerner Corporation. Their CEO at the time, Neil Patterson, was beyond passionate about what he did. Like every leader, there were certain characteristics I would say I didn't agree with, but had a lot of those attributes that I thought, wow, he's definitely passionate about what he does, and he embodied several of those things that they mentioned in the text.
That was a good one. Good example, a local company. I've worked with a few as an employee over the years, but as a consultant working with companies, I try to be selective about who I would even work with and who I would coach or what companies I would work with as far as their culture. But one that came to mind is Mandy Shoemaker, who is one of the co-founders of Prairie Elder Care. And so it's in healthcare, and they work with families with a loved one with dementia. So that's really hard healthcare. And then the employees and how they go about hiring and how they treat their people and how she speaks about her people when they're not even around, just when it's the two of us. And she speaks in a very caring way about them and about the families and the people who live there, and just everything. And even in struggles and times were tough of getting people during the pandemic, and she always spoke very highly of everyone, and decision making was tough, and she and was very caring, and I would say the conscious leader during all of that. And yeah, it was hard to see, but also inspiring to see. So.
Well, it's, in the book, he made several mentions to India's Tata company.
Yeah.
And it sounds very similar. He made mention of that the company was under a strike, the laborers were striking, and they were picketing in the sun. And he was concerned about the people picketing the company.
Yeah.
And for somebody to be, and they've used, empathy being that skill. And for somebody to be that empathetic to people that were basically attacking his company, to offer them shade or a cold drink, that takes a very big person, as we say, is comfortable in their skin to be able to do that.
Yeah. Seeing a bigger picture than anything else on a daily basis.
Exactly.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, as usual, we could go on and on for hours about these books, right? So next month, June 23rd is our next conversation, and we're talking about Radical Candor. It's this by Kim Scott, and it's Be a Kick-Ass Boss Without Losing Your Humanity. So taking some of this to another level, and we picked that one because that book keeps coming up in our conversations, and other authors that we've read keep referring to that book. So Radical Candor by Kim Scott will be next month, and I don't have my copy yet. I just ordered it the other day, and the Amazon only had a few left. So yeah, so be sure to get that soon if you don't have it yet. And I'll post a link to that on LinkedIn pretty soon. And and we always would love to hear from you if you have ideas for books or any books that you've liked or authors that you've liked or something that you're curious about. Please get in touch with any of us. You can post it in a comment on LinkedIn when you see the video, or I think we also post these on YouTube, I'm pretty sure. So wherever you see this, if you have any thoughts, feel free to email us or post a comment, and we will see that. Anything else before we go?
Well, we talked in the pregame. I hope I'm not on the line here, but we're on this side of the stage or the microphone, and we'd love to expand our circle, our whatever you want to call us, but our panel. And so, if for the listening audience, if you'd like to make the step for moving from the audience to potentially coming on the stage under the bright lights and being an active participant in the conversation, we would certainly welcome that. I would tell you it's a minimal obligation. Obviously, you'd be expected to read the book, and you can see how each one of us participate. But we'd like to diversify our group. Whether it's through minority, race, color, creed, educational background, different schools, universities, locations, locales, industries. We're a blank slate, but really looking to broaden our group and bring different views to our conversations. So if that's something that would be of interest to anybody that's listening, please reach out to any of us, and we'll kind of give you the background on what we do, the schedule, the requirement. But would really like to see more than the three of us on the group, and would welcome as much participation as anybody would feel comfortable with.
Yeah, right on. We have a KU friend lined up to talk to soon. That was our diversity. We brought on Dave as younger, and then we're three Rockers friends. So bringing on a KU guy, so that'll add some diversity. So yeah, totally open to your thoughts and ideas and participation. So we welcome you reaching out to us.
Well, and the interesting part about the KU friend that Kelly's referring to, his name's Adam, is his reading list was all different. I don't think I had read any of the books on his list.
Okay.
Which was kind of interesting. So when he gave us a kind of a short biop of who he is, and did a nice write-up of all of his books. So expanding our list obviously gives us access to each of your reading lists, and much like we do for each of you, you will validate that, hey, our time invested in a title that you're recommending will be time well spent. So we don't certainly want to pick a book that we take a flyer on and it turns out to not deliver, as they say. So just by broadening our group, it will give us access to additional titles.
And this the website leadership book, voyagecg.com leadership books, has Brett's reading list and my reading list. And Dave, I don't think you've sent one in yet, but when you get around to it, would love to post yours. Yeah. So our favorite business books are on there. So if you were interested in our reading list, check that out. Dave, any last thoughts?
No, I think we're good. Great book. Really enjoyed our time today.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you, Brett and Dave. And thank you, everybody, for watching and participating. And reach out to us if you have ideas for what else we could be doing here and if you'd like to join. So I think that is it. I'm looking at the notes quickly. I think that's it for us. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.